"Uncle, I know how to save your son," said the poor girl to the millionaire. "My son has been here for 3 days and no one can tell me what's wrong with him. This is unacceptable," said Michael, slamming his hand on the counter. While looking for the hospital director around a corner, he almost tripped over a girl. She couldn't have been more than 12 years old, wearing a simple dress faded by time. "Watch where you're going," Michael said automatically, stepping aside to continue on his way. "Uncle, I know what's wrong with your son." Michael stopped. He turned around slowly. "What?" "Your son, William, I know what's wrong with him and I know how to save him." Michael's expression hardened. "How do you know my son's name? Who are you?" The girl looked from side to side as if checking if anyone was watching them. "My name is Sophie. I live here." "Live here in the hospital?" "More or less. My mom works in cleaning and sometimes I stay around here. I know everyone. I see everything." A security guard approached. "Any problem, Mr. Anderson? Is this girl bothering you?" "No, everything's fine," replied Michael, too intrigued to dismiss the girl. "Can you give us a minute?" When the security guard moved away, Michael crouched, down to the girl's height. "Sophie, I don't know how you know my son, but the best doctors in this hospital are taking care of him. But they're giving him the wrong medicine," Sophie stated with conviction. "The new medicine, the one from the TV commercial. That's what's making your son sick. I've seen it happen to other children too." Michael felt a chill. Immunoplus, a medication recently launched by the pharmaceutical company, was exactly what William had been taking to strengthen his immune system after a severe flu. "How do you know my son is taking this medicine?" "I listen to the doctor's meetings. I hide behind that cabinet over there." She pointed to a piece of furniture at the end of the corridor. "There's a doctor who tried to warn everyone, but nobody believed her. Now she doesn't work here anymore." "What doctor?" "Dr. Caroline. She was the best doctor here. Everyone liked her. She discovered that there's something wrong with this medicine, but the hospital has a big contract with the pharmaceutical company." A man in a lab coat approached quickly. "Mr. Anderson, we were looking for you. The new test results have arrived." Michael stood up, torn between following the doctor and continuing the conversation with the girl. "Sophie, wait here, I need to—" But when he looked again, the girl had already disappeared into the crowd in the corridor. In the hospital's boardroom, Dr. Mark Vernon, the general director of St. Luke's, presented the latest tests with a grave expression. "The symptoms remain the same: weakness, joint pain, intermittent fever, and skin rashes. We've tested for various conditions, but we still don't have a conclusive diagnosis." Michael ran his hand through his graying hair. "Doctor, my son was 10 years old and perfectly healthy until 3 weeks ago. You're telling me that the best medical team in Boston can't figure out what's wrong with him?" Dr. Richard Miller, a representative from Vitapharma Laboratory who was attending the meeting, intervened. "Mr. Anderson, I assure you we're dedicating all possible resources. In fact, our laboratory is offering an experimental protocol that has already shown promising results in similar cases." Michael frowned. "Similar cases? Are there other cases like my son's?" The momentary silence in the room was revealing. Dr. Mark cleared his throat. "We've had some isolated cases of adverse reactions to medications in recent months, but nothing conclusive that could be related to William's condition." The girl's words echoed in Michael's mind. The new medicine, Immunoplus. "Dr. Mark, did the hospital recently fire a doctor named Caroline? One who questioned the hospital's protocols?" The director exchanged a quick look with the laboratory representative. "Dr. Caroline Bennett requested personal leave a few weeks ago. Why do you ask?" "Just curious," replied Michael, noticing the discomfort of the two men. "I want a second opinion. I'm going to transfer my son to America's hospital." "Mr. Anderson," Dr. Richard quickly intervened, "we don't recommend transferring the patient in his current state. Besides, we're implementing a new exclusive therapeutic protocol that would start when?" "Tomorrow morning. Everything is already prepared." Michael stood up. "I'll think about it. For now, don't authorize any new medication or procedure without my presence." As he left the room, Michael felt that something was wrong. Very wrong. He took out his cell phone and called his assistant. "Roger, I need you to find a doctor named Caroline Bennett, former employee of St. Luke's Hospital." It's urgent. After leaving specific instructions for the nursing team about William's care, Michael left the hospital after 9 in the evening. He was exhausted, but his mind was working at full speed. In the parking lot, while looking for his car keys, he noticed a movement in the shadows. Uncle. Michael turned around, alarmed, but relaxed when he recognized little Sophie. You scared me, child. Sorry, Uncle, but I can't be seen talking to you inside. There are bad people paying attention. Michael looked around. The parking lot was practically empty at that hour. Sophie, you mentioned a doctor, Dr. Caroline. Do you know where I can find her? The girl hesitated. I do, but I can't talk here. They might be watching. Who are they, Sophie? The laboratory people. They're always around pretending to be doctors or nurses. They listen to everything. Michael was beginning to wonder if the girl wasn't just fantasizing, but something in her conviction prevented him from simply ignoring her. How can I trust what you're telling me? I need proof. Sophie took a folded paper from her dress pocket. This is from your son's medical record. There's a test here that the doctors didn't show you. Michael unfolded the paper. It was a copy of a toxicological test dated 2 days ago, with a result that wasn't in the reports they had shown him. Presence of a chemical compound in William's blood, with a handwritten note. Check relation with immunoplus, do not disclose. His blood ran cold. Sophie, how did you get this? I already told you, Uncle. I see everything in here. Dr. Caroline ordered this special test before she was sent away. She suspected the new medicine. Michael put the paper in his jacket's inner pocket. I need to find this doctor. Can you take me to her? Sophie looked at her own shoes, worn and a size too big for her feet. I can, but it's not close. It's in Brighton. She's working at a community clinic now. Let's go then. My car is right over there. Sophie hesitated again. I don't know, Uncle. My mum will be worried if I disappear. Your mum is working now, isn't she? We can let her know. She is, but Sophie, my son could be in danger, please. The girl finally nodded. Okay, but we have to be quick. And you have to promise you'll help the other children too, not just your son. Michael looked into the girl's eyes, surprised by the maturity he saw there. I promise. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. In the outskirts of Brighton, Michael's luxury car attracted curious looks. Sophie guided him through narrow streets until they reached a simple building with a modest sign, Hope Community Clinic. Even at that late hour, there was activity at the location. A line of mothers with children in their arms waited for care. It's here, said Sophie. Dr. Caroline works late every night. They entered the clinic. The contrast with St. Luke's Hospital couldn't be greater. While the hospital was large and equipped with cutting-edge technology, the clinic was simple, clean, organized, but clearly operating with limited resources. At the reception, a middle-aged woman greeted them. Can I help you? We need to speak with Dr. Caroline Bennett. It's urgent, said Michael. The receptionist gave a suspicious look at the well-dressed man standing next to the humble girl. Dr. Caroline is with a patient. Do you have an appointment? No, but it's a matter of life and death, insisted Michael. Everyone here has emergencies, sir. You'll need to wait like the others. Sophie approached the counter. Miss Betty, it's me, Sophie. Remember how Dr. Caroline always says that if I show up, you should call her? The receptionist's expression softened. Sophie? The hospital girl? My goodness, it's been so long. You disappeared. I'm fine, Miss Betty, but I need to talk to the doctor now. It's about what she was investigating. The receptionist seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Wait a moment. She disappeared through a side door and returned minutes later. You can go into that room over there. She pointed to a door at the end of the corridor. She'll finish an appointment and come talk to you right away. The room was small, with a simple desk, a few chairs, and shelves full of medical records, handbooks. Michael noticed a frame on the wall, a diploma from Harvard Medical School in the name of Caroline Bennett with honors. How do you know this Dr. Sophie? He asked while they waited. She took care of me when I got sick last year. I was the first child with the same symptoms your son has now. Michael's eyes widened. You had the same symptoms? And what happened? Dr. Caroline discovered it was the medicine. She took me off it and I got better. But then other children started showing up with the same problems. When she tried to warn the hospital, they started persecuting her. The door opened and a woman in her 30s entered. She had dark hair tied in a practical bun and deep circles under her eyes that indicated sleepless nights. Despite the evident fatigue, her eyes were lively and alert. "Sophie," said the doctor, surprised. Then she noticed Michael. "And you are?" "Michael Anderson. My son is hospitalized at St. Luke's with mysterious symptoms, and according to Sophie, you might have the answer." Dr. Caroline closed the door and sat at the desk. "Sophie, what have you been up to?" "Just helping, Dr. Carroll. His son is taking Immunoplus like the other children." The doctor looked at Michael seriously. "Mr. Anderson, before we continue, I need to know, do you work for Vita Pharma or have any connection with them?" "No, I'm a real estate businessman, and my son is sick." Michael took the test from his pocket and placed it on the desk. "Sophie, got this from his medical record. It seems someone was trying to hide this result." Dr. Caroline examined the paper, and her face went pale. "The levels are higher than the other cases," she murmured. Then she looked at Michael. "How long has your son been taking Immunoplus?" "About a month. It was prescribed after a severe flu to strengthen his immune system. But I'm starting to think it did exactly the opposite." The doctor stood up and went to one of the shelves from which she took a thick folder. "Mr. Anderson, what I'm going to show you is the result of months of investigation. I've documented more than 30 cases of children with symptoms similar to your son's. They all had one thing in common, the use of Immunoplus." She opened the folder, showing graphs, tests, and photos of skin rashes identical to those William had. Immunoplus contains a compound that, in certain individuals with genetic predisposition, causes a severe autoimmune reaction. The laboratory has known this since the initial clinical trials, but manipulated the data to obtain quick approval. "And why is St. Luke's Hospital covering this up?" asked Michael, feeling anger rising. "Because St. Luke's signed $1 million contract with Vita Pharma. They are the reference hospital for the laboratory's clinical studies. Admitting that the medication is dangerous would mean losing millions in investments." Michael thought of Dr. Richard, the laboratory representative who seemed to never leave the hospital. "They're planning a new protocol for tomorrow, an experimental treatment." The doctor became alarmed. "Don't let them do that. They'll probably administer a higher dose of corticosteroids to mask the symptoms, but that will only hide the real problem and could cause permanent damage." Michael grabbed his phone. "I need to call the hospital and prevent any procedure." "It won't work," Sophie intervened. "They turn off William's phone at night, saying it interferes with the equipment." Michael checked his watch. Almost. "It's 11 p.m. I have to get back to the hospital immediately." "I'll go with you," offered Dr. Caroline. "I know St. Luke's protocols and exactly what they might be planning." "It's dangerous for you," warned Sophie. "They've threatened the doctor before." Caroline looked at the girl with affection. "Sophie, some battles are worth the risk." "This is one of them." Michael observed the interaction, impressed by the bond between the doctor and the girl. "Let's all three go then. My driver should be arriving soon." The doctor took her bag and a small medical kit. "Mr. Anderson, what we're about to face goes beyond saving your son. We're talking about a scheme that puts hundreds of children across the country at risk." "I understand," replied Michael, determined, "and I promised Sophie I would help all the affected children, not just my son." As they left the clinic, Michael called his lawyer. "Frank, I need you to file an injunction right away. I want to prevent any medical procedure on my son without my presence. Yes, I know it's late, but it's an emergency. I also want you to prepare documents for a formal complaint against Vita Pharma Laboratory and St. Luke's Hospital." Outside, a discreet black car was waiting. Unlike Michael's ostentatious Mercedes, this vehicle belonged to a private security service he maintained. "Roger," Michael addressed the man who got out of the car to receive them. "We need to return to St. Luke's immediately, and I want you to activate our security team. There could be trouble." Roger, a former police officer who had worked for Michael for years, nodded without asking questions. As they got into the car, Michael noticed that Sophie seemed nervous. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "I'm scared, Uncle. The last time Dr. Caroline confronted the laboratory people, bad things happened." The doctor held the girl's hand. "This time is different, Sophie. We have Mr. Anderson on our side." Michael looked at the two, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had assumed. "You can count on me. I have enough resources and influence to face this situation." What Michael didn't say was that he was also afraid, not just for his son, but for what he was about to face. A powerful and apparently corrupt system, willing to profit at the expense of innocent children's health. As the car advanced through the night toward Boston, Michael made another call. "Hello, Julia. Yes, I know it's late. No, I don't have news from the hospital, but I discovered something important. I'm heading back there now. No, it's better if you don't go. Trust me. Yes, I promise to keep you informed." When he hung up, he found the questioning looks of Caroline and Sophie. "My ex-wife, William's mother," he explained. "I prefer to keep her away from this for now. She would be frightened." "You didn't tell her about the medicine?" asked Sophie. "Not yet. First, I need to be absolutely certain and have a concrete plan. Julia is impulsive. She could complicate things." The rest of the journey was in relative silence, each absorbed in their thoughts. From time to time, Dr. Caroline made notes in a small notebook. "What are you writing?" asked Michael. "I'm preparing a detailed report on your son's case to compare it with my other records. Every detail could be important to establish the pattern of reaction to the medication." Michael admired the doctor's dedication, even after apparently facing so many obstacles. "Why did you decide to investigate this, doctor? Why risk your career?" Caroline looked up from her notebook. "Because I swore to protect my patients, Mr. Anderson, and when I saw the pattern repeating, child after child, presenting the same symptoms after taking the same medication, I couldn't ignore it." "Was that Sophie's case too?" The doctor looked at the girl, who was now dozing against the car window. "Sophie was the first one I identified, a street girl who came to the emergency room with high fever and rashes all over her body. She had received the medication in a health campaign in the slum where she lives. After her, others came, all from poor communities." "Why mainly children from poor areas?" "Because they're invisible," Caroline answered bitterly. "Who will notice or care if children from the slums get sick? Besides, the laboratory makes many donations of medications to poor communities, perfect for testing products without drawing attention." The answer hit Michael like a punch. He had always lived in a bubble of privilege, where problems like this seemed distant, sensationalist TV reports that were quickly forgotten. And how did Sophie end up so involved in this story? She had nowhere to go after her recovery. Her mother works in shifts at the hospital, and Sophie frequently stays there, wandering the corridors. She started following me, observing my work. She has impressive intelligence for her age. And how does she know so much about my son? Sophie has the gift of observation. She goes unnoticed through the corridors, listens to conversations, sees reports being transmitted. She became my eyes and ears in the hospital after I left. The car entered the avenue that led to St. Luke's Hospital. Michael felt the tension increase as they approached. "What exactly should we expect when we get there?" he asked. Caroline put the notebook in her bag. "Resistance, denial, possibly veiled threats. Director Mark Vernon is deeply involved with the laboratory, and we need to be especially concerned about Dr. Richard Miller, the Vita Pharma representative, who practically lives in the hospital. He's dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "He was the one who orchestrated my departure. He created a false dossier claiming I was frightening patients with conspiracy theories. He even insinuated that I was mentally unstable." Michael nodded, processing the information. "I have some contacts in the press," he said. "If necessary, we can make everything public." "We need to be careful," warned Caroline. "Without concrete evidence, we'll be easily discredited. The laboratory has a very efficient public relations machine." The car finally arrived at the hospital parking lot. Even at that late hour, there was considerable movement. "Wake up," said Michael, gently touching Sophie's shoulder. "We've arrived." The girl woke up, rubbing her eyes. "Uncle, there's something I didn't tell you. I think they're going to do the new thing to your son tonight, not tomorrow." Michael and Caroline exchanged alarmed looks. "How do you know that?" asked the doctor. "I heard Dr. Richard talking to a nurse before leaving. He said it would be better to advance the procedure before the father created problems." Michael felt his blood boil. "Let's hurry." They got out of the car, and Michael instructed Roger, "Stay nearby and alert. If I don't give you news in an hour, come in with the security team." The three walked quickly to the hospital entrance. Dr. Caroline pulled a white coat from her bag and put it on. "It will make it easier for me to move around," she explained. "I still have friends in there." In the main hall, security was minimal at that hour. Michael showed his identification as a patient's father, and Caroline passed as a doctor from the clinical staff. "And the girl?" asked the security guard. "She's with me," said Michael firmly. "She's an authorized visitor for my son." Although visibly suspicious, the man didn't want to confront someone clearly influential. They took the elevator to the 4th floor, where the pediatric ward was located. Michael felt his heart accelerate with each second. "Room 412, he murmured. As they exited the elevator, Caroline stopped them. "Wait, something's wrong." At the nursing station, there was more movement than normal for that time. On-call doctors were talking in low tones, and 2 nurses were preparing what looked like equipment for a procedure. "They're getting ready," whispered Caroline. "We need to act quickly." Michael advanced down the corridor, determined, with Caroline and Sophie following closely. As they approached room 412, they saw that the door was ajar and voices were coming from inside. Michael pushed the door without knocking. What he saw left him cold. Dr. Richard Miller and 2 nurses were beside William's bed, preparing a syringe with a clear liquid. His son, pale and with visible rashes on his arms, was asleep. "What do you think you're doing?" asked Michael, his voice trembling with anger. Dr. Richard turned, surprised. "Mr. Anderson, we weren't expecting you at this hour. Clearly. Expressly said that no procedure should be performed without my presence. That there was a change in your son's clinical condition," the doctor quickly explained. "We need to intervene immediately." Caroline stepped forward. "What medication are you about to administer?" Richard's eyes widened when he recognized her. "Dr. Bennett, what are you doing here? You no longer have authorization to—" "Answer the question," interrupted Michael. "What medication is that?" One of the nurses, visibly uncomfortable, answered, "It's an experimental corticosteroid combined with an immunosuppressive agent, sir." Caroline approached the tray with the medication. "Exactly as I feared. They want to suppress the symptoms without treating the cause." "This is absurd," protested Richard. "We're following an approved protocol for cases like this." "Approved by whom?" questioned Michael. "Certainly not by me, who is the patient's legal guardian." "Mr. Anderson," Richard tried to regain his composure, "I understand your concern, but you don't have the medical knowledge to evaluate what's best for your son." "But I do," intervened Caroline, "and I know exactly what this treatment will do. It will temporarily mask the symptoms while the causative agent Immunoplus continues in the body, causing increasingly severe damage." Richard gave the doctor a furious look. "That's defamation. Immunoplus is a safe medication, approved by the FDA after extensive clinical trials." "Manipulated trials," Caroline retorted. "I have evidence that the laboratory knew about the side effects and hid the data." Michael approached his son's bed, placing himself between him and the doctors. "I didn't authorize this procedure, and I demand that you leave the room right now." The nurses, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, began to collect the material. "Dr. Miller," said one of them, "without the guardian's authorization, we can't proceed." Richard seemed about to explode with anger. "You don't understand the gravity of the situation. If we don't act now—" "The only grave thing here," interrupted Michael, "is the attempt to perform a procedure without consent. My lawyer is already filing an injunction, and if you insist, it will be much worse." Dr. Richard looked from Michael to Caroline, and then noticed Sophie for the first time, partially hidden behind the doctor. "You!" he exclaimed. "The girl who was always spying on the meetings. So that's it, you're conspiring together." Sophie took a step back, frightened by the reaction. Caroline protectively positioned herself in front of the girl. "This child was one of the first victims of your miraculous medication, doctor. She survived to tell the story, unlike others who didn't have the same luck. The mention of possible death seemed to alarm the nurses even more. "Dr. Richard," said one of them, "I think we'd better stop and discuss this with management." Richard looked around, realizing he was losing control of the situation. "You'll regret this," he muttered, before heading to the door. Before leaving, he turned to Michael. "Mr. Anderson, you're being manipulated by a discredited doctor and a street child. When your son gets worse in the next few hours, remember that it was your choice to refuse treatment." As soon as Richard left, the nurses visibly relaxed. "Mr. Anderson," said one of them, a middle-aged man with a gentle expression, "I'm Nurse Charles, responsible for the night shift. If I may say, several of us are concerned about these new protocols. This isn't the first such case we've seen in recent weeks." Michael looked at the man, surprised by the confession. "You knew about the problems with the medication?" "We suspected," replied Charles. "But who are we to question the doctors and the laboratory? When Dr. Caroline tried to alert everyone, we saw how she was treated." Caroline approached William's bed, examining him carefully. "He needs immediate detoxification treatment," she said, "and we have to completely suspend Immunoplus." "It's been suspended for 2 days," informed Charles. When the symptoms worsened, Dr. Mark ordered the suspension, but without recording the reason in the chart. "Typical," muttered Caroline. "They're trying to erase the tracks." Michael held his sleeping son's hand, feeling a mixture of relief and fury. "What do we do now?" he asked the doctor. "First, we need to stabilize him with the correct treatment," replied Caroline. "Then, gather all the evidence and formally report the case." Nurse Charles hesitated before speaking. "I have something that might help." He took a small USB drive from his pocket. "I copied some files from the system before they were deleted. Patient histories with similar reactions, all treated with Immunoplus." Michael and Caroline looked at the man, surprised. "Why are you helping us?" asked Michael. "Because I have grandchildren," he replied simply. "And because what they're doing here isn't medicine, it's business, and of the worst kind." Caroline accepted the USB drive with gratitude. "This could be crucial." "Charles, thank you." Sophie, who had been observing everything in silence, finally spoke. "See, Uncle, there are good people here too, like I said." Michael smiled at the girl, admiring her insight. "You were right all along, Sophie." Nurse Charles looked at the girl with curiosity. "You're the little one who was always running through the corridors, aren't you? I always suspected you saw more than you let on." Sophie gave a shy smile. "I just wanted to help the sick children." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Caroline finished examining William and turned to Michael. "His condition is stable, but we need to start the correct treatment as soon as possible. I'll need authorization to prescribe medications." "Consider yourself authorized," replied Michael. "Do whatever is necessary to save my son." While Caroline was talking with the nurse about the necessary medications, the door to the room opened again. It was Dr. Mark Vernon, the hospital director, accompanied by 2 security guards. "What's happening here?" he asked, visibly irritated. When he saw Caroline, his expression hardened even more. "Dr. Bennett, you don't have authorization to be in this hospital, much less to examine patients." Michael positioned himself between the director and the doctor. "She's here at my request as a private medical consultant." "That's irregular," insisted Mark. "The hospital has protocols." "What's irregular," interrupted Michael, "is trying to perform procedures on my son without my authorization. Or should I also mention the attempts to hide test results?" The director seemed momentarily disconcerted. "I don't know what you're talking about." Michael took the paper from his pocket and handed it to him. "This toxicological test, for example, which mysteriously didn't appear in the reports that were presented to me." Mark examined the document, his face losing color. This is a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" intervened Caroline. "Just like it was a misunderstanding. When I warned about the adverse effects of Immunoplus and was removed for mental problems." Nurse Charles stepped forward. "Dr. Mark, other team members have also noticed the pattern. It's not a coincidence that so many children are presenting the same symptoms after taking the same medication." The director seemed cornered. "You Don't understand. The hospital depends financially on the partnership with Vita Pharma. If this comes to light, completed Michael, you and everyone involved will be facing a scandal of unimaginable proportions. Unauthorized experimentation on children, concealment of evidence. The damage to the hospital's reputation will be the least of your problems. Sophie, who had been quiet until then, spoke. And the other children, doctor? Those who don't have a rich father to protect them. The girl's question seemed to hit the director harder than all the previous threats. We didn't know the extent of the problem, he tried to justify. The laboratory assured us they were isolated cases. Lie, said Sophie with surprising firmness. I saw you talking with Dr. Richard about the other cases. You knew. The director looked at the girl, finally recognizing her. You're the girl that Dr. Caroline treated last year, the cleaning lady's daughter. My name is Sophie, she replied, raising her chin, and I know everything you did. Mark seemed to deflate before the child's determination. He turned to Michael. Mr. Anderson, we can discuss this civilly. I'm sure we can come to an agreement that benefits everyone. The only agreement I'm interested in, Michael replied coldly, is one that guarantees my son's recovery and the safety of all other affected children. And the formal reporting of the case to health authorities, added Caroline. The director ran his hand over his face, visibly stressed. This will destroy the hospital. No, doctor, corrected Michael. This will save the hospital. The real destruction would be to continue this scheme until the consequences become impossible to hide. At this moment, William began to stir in the bed, slowly opening his eyes. Dad? He called in a weak voice. Michael rushed to his son's side. I'm here, son. Everything will be fine now. The boy looked confused at the people in the room. What's happening? Who are these people? They're friends, replied Michael, stroking his son's hair. They came to help you get better. Caroline approached. Hi, William. I'm Dr. Caroline. Are you feeling better? The boy nodded. A little, but it still hurts. We'll take care of that, promised the doctor. She turned to the nurse. Charles, we need to start the detoxification treatment immediately. Prepare a solution with... While Caroline gave technical instructions, Dr. Mark observed the scene, seeming increasingly defeated. You have two choices, Dr. Mark, said Michael, without taking his eyes off his son. You can join us in the complaint as someone who, upon discovering the problem, acted to correct it. Or you can be investigated as an accomplice. The decision is yours. The director remained silent for a few seconds, visibly weighing his options. You don't understand the pressure we face, he finally said. The hospital was on the verge of bankruptcy when Vita Pharma appeared with the partnership proposal. And how much is a child's life worth, doctor? Asked Sophie. Or several. The simple and direct question from the girl seemed to finally break the doctor's resistance. I'll cooperate, he said quietly. But I need guarantees that the hospital won't be shut down. We serve thousands of people who depend on us. If you cooperate fully, replied Michael, my goal won't be to destroy the hospital, but to clean it of this corruption and make it an example of medical ethics. Dr. Mark nodded slowly. Dr. Richard won't accept this easily. He has a lot to lose. Let me handle Dr. Richard, said Michael. I have sufficient resources to face him and the laboratory if necessary. The director gestured for the security guards to leave. I'll formally authorize Dr. Caroline to reassume your son's case, Mr. Anderson, and I'll order an immediate review of all similar cases in the hospital. As he left, he turned one last time. I hope I don't regret this. When the door closed, Caroline continued working quickly, with Nurse Charles's help, preparing William's treatment. Sophie approached the bed. Hi, I'm Sophie. I knew we were going to help you. William, still weak, smiled at the girl. You seem to know a lot of things. That's because I observe everything, she replied with a smile. Your illness is the same as I had, but you'll get better soon. Michael watched the interaction, amazed at the girl's ability to connect with his son. He thought about all the extraordinary events of that night, how a child from the streets had become the catalyst. That could save not only William, but potentially hundreds of other children. Sophie, he called. Where is your mom now? She must be worried. The girl looked at the clock on the wall. She's on the night shift cleaning the 3rd floor. She finishes at 6 in the morning. I'd like to meet her, said Michael, to thank her for what you did. Sophie smiled. She'll be scared if you suddenly show up. It's better if I explain first. That's fair, agreed Michael. Then he had an idea. Sophie, you and your mom, do you live near here? Not too far. In the Roxbury community. It's small, but it's our little corner. Michael nodded, thoughtful. When all this is over, I'd like to talk to both of you about a proposal. A thank you for what you did for my son. Sophie shook her head. You don't need to, Uncle. I just did what was right. Even so, insisted Michael, you changed my life today, and many other people's too. Caroline, who was finishing administering intravenous medication to William, intervened. Sophie has always been special. From the first day I met her, I realized she saw the world differently than others. It's true, agreed Nurse Charles. She seemed invisible to most people here, but observed everything. Some nurses even joked that she was our friendly little ghost. Sophie laughed at the nickname. I just wanted to learn, see how people got better after being sick. And after Dr. Caroline cured me, I wanted to help too. Michael felt a wave of admiration for the girl's determination. You have a bright future ahead of you, Sophie, and if it depends on me, you'll have every opportunity to achieve it. Michael's cell phone rang. It was Roger, his security guard. Sir, we have a situation down here. The laboratory representative, Dr. Richard, is trying to access some files in the administrative sector. He seems quite agitated. Don't let him leave the hospital, instructed Michael. I suspect he's trying to destroy evidence. After hanging up, he explained the situation to the others. We need to act quickly, said Caroline. If he manages to delete the internal records, he won't succeed, assured Nurse Charles, showing the USB drive. I have backup copies of the main files, and with Dr. Mark's cooperation, we can access the rest. Michael stood up. I'll go down to make sure Richard doesn't cause more problems. Caroline, can you stay with William? Certainly, replied the doctor. The treatment has already been initiated, and he should start showing improvement in the next few hours. Sophie also stood up. I'll go with you, Uncle. I know where the file room is. Michael hesitated. It could be dangerous, Sophie. More dangerous is letting him destroy the evidence, argued the girl. Besides, I know all the shortcuts in the hospital. Recognizing the girl's determination, Michael agreed. All right, but stay close to me at all times. Before they left, he approached his son once more. I'll be back soon, son. Stay calm, you're in good hands. William nodded weakly. Dad, that doctor with glasses, Dr. Richard, he gave me different medicines when you weren't here. He said, it was our secret. The revelation made Michael's blood boil. Don't worry, son, he won't get near you again. In the corridor, Michael and Sophie found Roger, who was waiting for them near the elevator. He's in the basement archives room, informed the security guard. He has 2 more men with him. They seem to be from the laboratory too. Let's take the other elevator, suggested Sophie. The service one. It gives direct access to the back corridor. Following the girls' guidance, they went down to the basement by an alternative route. The environment was completely different from the upper floors, poorly lit corridors, peeling walls, and a musty smell that indicated the antiquity of that part of the building. It's this way, whispered Sophie, guiding them through a side corridor. The archives room is just past that fire door. Approaching silently, they could hear raised voices. Delete everything, ordered a voice that Michael recognized as Richard's. We can't leave traces. If this data goes public, we're finished. Doctor, this is illegal, protested another voice. These are official medical records. What's illegal? Retorted Richard. Is you questioning me when our career is at stake? You think your participation in the trials isn't documented too? Michael signaled to Roger, who understood immediately. The security guard advanced and suddenly opened the door. Inside the room, Dr. Richard and 2 men in lab coats were in front of an old computer. On the desk were several external hard drives and a stack of physical documents. Good evening, gentlemen, said Michael, entering the room. Extra work at this hour? Richard turned pale when he saw him. This is a restricted area. Curiously, replied Michael, I just received authorization from Dr. Mark to access all records related to my son's case and other children treated with Immuno+. This is absurd, protested Richard. The director doesn't have the authority to— Yes, he does, interrupted Michael, especially after deciding to cooperate with the investigations. The two men accompanying Richard exchanged nervous looks. Dr. Miller, said one of them, perhaps we should reconsider our position. Shut up, shouted Richard. Nobody is reconsidering anything. We have an ironclad contract with the hospital. A contract that will be nullified as soon as fraud is proven, replied Michael calmly. And believe me, I have sufficient resources to ensure that happens. Richard seemed cornered, but still tried to argue. You don't know who you're dealing with, Anderson. Vita Pharma has connections at all levels of government. This story will never come to light. Don't underestimate the power of a father determined to protect his son, replied Michael, or the reach of someone with my resources. At this moment, Sophie, who was partially hidden behind Roger, stepped forward. Hi, Dr. Richard, remember me? The doctor's eyes widened when he recognized her. The girl, Caroline's first patient. Yes, confirmed Sophie, the one you said had imagined the symptoms because she was malnourished. Richard seemed even more disturbed. That was over a year ago. How did I survive? Completed Sophie. Dr. Caroline saved me. After you said I was pretending to get food from the hospital. Michael observed the interaction, impressed by the girl's courage. Sophie was the first to identify the pattern, he explained, and thanks to her, we're here tonight, preventing you from continuing to poison innocent children. Poisoning? Richard let out a nervous laugh. How absurd. Immuno+ went through all regulatory tests. Adulterated tests, retorted Michael, and I have proof of that now. Roger approached the computers. Sir, they've already deleted some files, but we can recover them with specialized technicians. Richard took a step toward the exit. This is absurd. I'm going to speak with the hospital's administrative board immediately. You're not going anywhere, replied Michael. Not until the police arrive. Police? Richard turned pale. You called the police? Not yet, replied Michael, but I can resolve that right now. He took out his cell phone. Unless you prefer to cooperate voluntarily. Richard's two assistants seemed increasingly nervous. Doctor, said one of them, I think we should reconsider. Shut up, shouted Richard again. Nobody is going to say anything. Michael observed the dynamic with interest. It seems your colleagues have more common sense than you, Doctor. Perhaps we should listen to them. We were just following orders, one of them, a young man who didn't look more than 30, quickly said. The laboratory instructed us to follow the experimental protocol even after the first adverse cases. Shut up, Phil, ordered Richard. No, enough of this, retorted the young man, turning to Michael. Sir, I'm a biomedical scientist. I work in drug development. When the first reports of adverse effects arrived, about a year ago, we alerted management, but they told us they were statistically irrelevant and that the launch schedule couldn't be altered. Richard advanced threateningly toward the young man, but Roger intervened. Anyone else want to share information? Asked Michael, seeing that the situation was unfolding in his favor. The second man, older and with a tired appearance, sighed deeply. I was responsible for post-marketing monitoring. We started receiving reports of serious adverse reactions 3 months after the launch. The board ordered us to classify all of them as not related to the medication. You're all traitors, shouted Richard. You signed confidentiality agreements, which don't apply in cases of fraud and risk to public health, retorted Michael. Any competent lawyer will confirm that. At this moment, Sophie tugged on Michael's shirt sleeve. Uncle, more people are coming. Hurried footsteps echoed through the corridor. Seconds later, Dr. Mark entered the room, accompanied by 2 hospital security guards and Dr. Caroline. What's happening here? Asked the director, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Apparently, replied Michael, Dr. Richard and his team were trying to erase incriminating evidence from the hospital's systems. Mark gave Richard a severe look. Is this true? Mark, don't be an idiot, retorted Richard. We're all in the same boat. If I fall, you fall too. The director maintained his composure. Not anymore, Richard. I just forwarded a detailed report to the hospital's ethics committee, admitting my participation and detailing the entire scheme. "You what?" shouted Richard, advancing threateningly. The security guards quickly restrained him. "I also requested a complete external audit of our research and prescription protocols," continued Mark, "and immediately suspended the administration of Immunoplus to all hospital patients." Caroline stepped forward. "Dr. Mark has agreed to temporarily readmit me to supervise the treatment of all children potentially affected by the medication." Richard seemed not to believe what he was hearing. "You can't do this. The laboratory will sue all of you." "Let them try," replied Michael. "I have some of the best lawyers in the country at my disposal, and now I also have witnesses." He indicated Richard's two assistants, who seemed relieved to no longer be complicit in the scheme. "How naive you all are," shouted Richard, still struggling against the security guards restraining him. "Vita Pharma is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. You think you can face it?" "Not only can we," replied Michael calmly, "but we must, for every child who suffered because of your greed." Sophie, who had been observing everything in silence, approached Richard. "Do you remember that girl who died 6 months ago? Lucy from room 508? You said it was because of a hospital infection, but it was the medicine, wasn't it?" The girl's innocent questions seemed to hit Richard like a physical blow. He stopped fighting against the security guards and suddenly turned pale. How do you know about that?" "I was there," replied Sophie simply. "I saw when you changed her medical record afterwards." A heavy silence fell over the room. The mention of a possible victim made the situation even more serious. "Richard," said Dr. Mark, with a trembling voice, "is this true? Were there fatal cases?" The laboratory representative didn't answer, but his silence and expression were confirmation enough. "My God," murmured Caroline, bringing her hand to her mouth. "I suspected, but I hoped I was wrong." Michael felt a wave of nausea, thinking how close his own son had been to a similar fate. "Dr. Mark," he said firmly, "I suggest you call the police immediately. This already exceeds the limits of simple corporate fraud." The director nodded gravely. "I've already taken that step, Mr. Anderson. They should arrive at any moment." Richard, finally realizing the gravity of his situation, tried one last card. "Anderson, think carefully. Vita Pharma is your partner in several ventures. What will happen to your investments when this comes to light?" Michael looked coldly at the man. "Unlike you, Doctor, some things are more important to me than money. My son's life, for example, and that of all the other children you put at risk." At that moment, Nurse Charles arrived hurriedly. "Dr. Caroline, William is responding well to the treatment. His vital signs are improving significantly." The news brought a smile of relief to everyone's face except Richard's, who seemed to sink deeper into despair. "Let's go back to the room," suggested Michael, putting his hand on Sophie's shoulder. "Let the police and Dr. Mark handle the rest for now." As they left the room, Richard shouted one last threat. "This isn't over, Anderson. Vita Pharma has connections you can't even imagine." Michael turned one last time. "No, Richard. For you, it's over. And if it depends on me, no other child will be a victim of your greed." In the corridor, as they walked back to the elevator, Caroline approached Michael. "What do you plan to do now?" "First, ensure William's complete recovery," he replied. "Then use all my resources to expose this scheme and hold those responsible accountable." Sophie, who was walking beside them, seemed thoughtful. "Uncle, what about the other children who took the medicine but aren't in the hospital? How will we find them?" The girl's question showed a concern that went beyond her own welfare or even William's case. "That's an excellent question, Sophie," replied Michael. "I'll need your help for that too." As they entered the elevator, Michael made a decision that would change the course of his life and many others. It wouldn't just be about saving his son now, but about using his influence and resources to correct a greater injustice. "Dr. Caroline," he said, "when all this is calmer, I'd like to discuss a proposal with you about creating an independent institute for monitoring medications, especially those intended for children." The doctor looked at him with surprise and interest. "That would be an ambitious project. And necessary," completed Michael, "as we discovered in the worst possible way." Sophie, hearing the conversation, smiled. "Can I work there too when I grow up? I already know how to observe things well. Michael and Caroline laughed at the girl's innocent ambition. "Of course you can," replied Michael. "In fact, I think you've already taken the first step in your career." As the elevator rose, taking them back to the room where William was, recovering, Michael reflected on how his life had completely changed that night. Thanks to a girl most people didn't even notice, he would not only save his son, but also find a new purpose. "Uncle," Sophie called timidly, "do you think William will want to be my friend afterward? I've never had a rich friend before." Michael smiled, touched by the simplicity of the girl's concern amid everything that was happening. "I'm sure he will, Sophie, and I believe it will be the beginning of a very special friendship." The elevator reached the 4th floor, and the doors opened to a new chapter in all their lives. 3 months later, the auditorium of the Anderson Foundation for Pharmaceutical Safety was packed for its inauguration ceremony. On stage, Michael was accompanied by William, now completely recovered, by Dr. Caroline, now the Foundation's scientific director, and by Sophie, who wore a new dress and had her hair carefully arranged. "It is with great satisfaction that we announce the beginning of our Foundation's activities," Michael was saying. "Born from a painful personal experience, but transformed into a mission to protect children across the country." In the audience, journalists, health authorities, doctors, and families of children affected by Immunoplus were following attentively. "The Foundation will have 3 fundamental pillars," continued Michael. "Independent monitoring of pediatric medications, legal and medical assistance to families affected by adverse reactions, and education about safe medication use." He paused, looking at Sophie with a smile. But none of this would be possible without the extraordinary courage of a girl who, when all the adults failed, had the wisdom and determination to make a difference. "Sophie, would you like to say a few words?" The girl, visibly nervous but determined, approached the microphone. "Hi, my name is Sophie. I just wanted to say that anyone can make a difference, no matter if they're rich or poor, adult or child. The important thing is not to be afraid to speak up when you see something wrong." The simplicity and depth of her words drew emotional applause from the audience. Then it was William's turn to approach the microphone. "Sophie saved my life," he said simply, "and now she's my best friend. Together, we're going to help other children too." The two hugged on stage, symbolizing a union that transcended all social barriers, the pure friendship between 2 children whom destiny had placed on such different paths, but which now converged. In the months following the complaint, much had changed. Vitapharma faced million-dollar lawsuits and criminal investigations. Immunoplus had been withdrawn from the market, and a complete review of their other medications was underway. Dr. Richard awaited trial, as did other laboratory executives. St. Luke's Hospital, under new management after Dr. Mark's resignation, who chose to cooperate with investigations in exchange for a reduced sentence, was undergoing a complete restructuring of its ethical protocols and partnerships. As for Sophie and her mother, Mrs. Connie, they now lived in a comfortable apartment near the school where Sophie had been enrolled with a full scholarship. Mrs. Connie continued working, but now as a hospital cleaning supervisor at the Foundation itself, with a decent salary and hours that allowed her to be more present in her daughter's life. Dr. Caroline, professionally rehabilitated and recognized for her ethics and persistence, led a team of researchers dedicated to studying adverse effects of medications in vulnerable populations, especially children. And Michael, previously known only for his luxury real estate ventures, had discovered a new vocation as an advocate for pharmaceutical safety and children's rights. His priority, however, remained William, with whom he now spent much more time, rediscovering the value of present fatherhood. "To conclude this ceremony," said Michael, taking the microphone again, "I would like to announce that the Foundation has already identified more than 200 children potentially affected by Immunoplus across the country, and we are contacting each family to offer medical and legal assistance." He paused, looking at the audience seriously. "This is just the beginning. Our mission is to ensure that no child is a victim of unsafe medications or unethical practices in the pharmaceutical industry, and for this, we count on all of your help." Applause echoed through the auditorium as Michael, Caroline, William, and Sophie held hands, united by a cause that was born from adversity but blossomed in hope. At the end of the ceremony, as the guests dispersed for the cocktail reception, Sophie pulled Michael to a corner. "Uncle. I mean godfather," she corrected herself, referring to the new title Michael had assumed in her life. "Do you think we can really change things?" Michael crouched down to the girl's height. "Sophie, you've already changed the world, at least my world and William's, and this is just the beginning." The girl smiled, her eyes shining with a mixture of childish innocence and wisdom beyond her years. "You know, sometimes I think everything happened for a reason. Me getting sick, then showing up at the hospital when William needed help." "Maybe you're right," agreed Michael. "Some people would call that destiny." "I call it a mission," replied Sophie with simplicity. "Everyone has one. They just need to discover what it is." Michael felt his eyes water at the depth of the observation. "And what is your mission, Sophie?" The girl looked to where William was animatedly talking with other children. "To help those in need, even when nobody believes I can, like I did with William." Michael hugged the small girl who had transformed his life. "That's a noble mission, and I'll be by your side every step of the way." From across the room, Caroline observed the scene with a smile. She approached Mrs. Connie, who still felt out of place amid so much luxury. "Your daughter is extraordinary, Connie." Sophie's mother nodded, her eyes full of pride. "I always knew my girl was special. I just didn't imagine how much." "She has a bright future ahead of her," commented Caroline. "Thank God, and Mr. Anderson," replied Connie. "I still can't believe everything that happened." "Believe it," smiled Caroline, "and this is just the beginning." That night, as the new foundation celebrated its birth, a simple truth hung in the air. Sometimes, the greatest wisdom comes from the smallest and most unlikely voices. And sometimes, it takes one brave child to remind adults of the true meaning of doing what's right, no matter how difficult it may seem. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. 1 year later, the Anderson Foundation was nationally recognized for its pioneering work. The ImmunoPlus case, as it became known, had become a landmark in American health surveillance, leading to significant changes in legislation on clinical trials and medication approval, especially those intended for children. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, the garden of the Foundation's new headquarters was filled with children for a special celebration, Sophie's birthday, who was turning 13. It was a simple but joyful celebration, bringing together friends from school, recovered former ImmunoPlus patients, and the Foundation staff, who saw the girl as a kind of mascot and inspiration. William, now 11, followed Sophie everywhere, like an admiring younger brother. The two had developed an unlikely but deep friendship, united by their shared experience and genuine desire to help other children. Michael observed the scene with a smile beside Caroline, with whom he had developed a relationship that went beyond professional partnership. The doctor, previously dedicated exclusively to her career, had found in Michael someone who shared her values and worldview. "I'm still surprised to see how everything changed in just 1 year," commented Caroline, as they watched the children playing. "For the better," replied Michael. "Despite everything, I can't help thinking that that night at the hospital was one of the most important moments of my life." Caroline smiled. "It's curious how sometimes the greatest tragedies can transform into the greatest blessings." "Speaking of blessings," said Michael, indicating Sophie, who was approaching with William, "here come our little heroes." Sophie ran up to them, excited, holding a paper in her hands. "Godfather, Dr. Caroline, look what just arrived." It was an official letter from the State Department of Education, informing that Sophie had been selected for a special program for young scientific talents. "They liked my project on monitoring adverse reactions to medications in children," explained Sophie, barely containing her excitement. "They said they'd never seen such a complete proposal from someone my age." Michael hugged the girl, proud. "I'm not at all surprised. You've always been extraordinary, Sophie." Caroline also hugged her. "We're very proud of you, and this is just the beginning of your journey." William tugged on Sophie's sleeve. "Tell them about our other project." Sophie smiled, a little shy. Well, William and I are working on an app for children to report medication side effects in a simple way. The idea is that they can record how they feel before and after taking a medicine. Using emojis and language that children understand, completed William, excited. It was Sophie's idea, I'm just helping with the programming part. Michael and Caroline exchanged impressed looks. That's brilliant, said Caroline. We could implement it at the foundation as a pilot project. And expand nationally if it works well, added Michael. Sophie smiled, pleased to see her idea taken seriously. I just thought it would be easier for children to tell how they feel if they could do it their way, you know, without all that complicated medical language. That's exactly why it's such a good idea, said Caroline. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest. The party continued lively with cake, games, and lots of joy. Mrs. Connie, now coordinator of a training program for underprivileged families within the foundation, watched her daughter with pride, hardly believing the transformation their lives had undergone. At the end of the afternoon, when most of the guests had already left, Michael gathered a small group in the foundation's office: Caroline, Sophie, William, Connie, and Charles, the nurse who had become training coordinator for the health team. I have an important announcement to make, said Michael. Vita Pharma has finally agreed to an out-of-court settlement. They will pay compensation to all families affected by Immunoplus and fund independent research on pediatric pharmaceutical safety. The news was received with expressions of relief and satisfaction. As for Dr. Richard and the other executives involved, continued Michael, the trial will begin next month. With the evidence we've gathered, the prosecution is confident of a conviction. And Dr. Mark? Asked Caroline, referring to the former director of St. Luke's Hospital. As he collaborated from the beginning and provided crucial evidence, he'll receive a reduced sentence, probably converted to community service, replied Michael. He's already working as a consultant in our hospital ethics program. Sophie, who was listening attentively to everything, raised her hand as she did in school. And the other children who took the medicine, have they all been found? Michael smiled at the girl's constant concern for the other victims. Thanks to our active search program, we've already identified 98% of the registered cases. All are receiving free medical follow-up through the foundation. And St. Luke's? Asked Charles. Many of my former colleagues are concerned about the hospital's future. The hospital is undergoing a complete restructuring, explained Michael. With new management and rigorous ethical protocols. In fact, we're establishing a partnership for pharmacovigilance training for the entire staff. The conversation continued, discussing future plans and celebrating the achievements already made. Sophie, although actively participating, seemed thoughtful. Later, when they were leaving, Michael noticed the girl's expression. Something wrong, Sophie? You seem worried on your own birthday. The girl hesitated before answering. I was thinking about Lucy, the girl who, you know, the one we couldn't save. Michael felt a pang in his heart. Amid all the victories, there were losses that couldn't be reversed. Sophie, unfortunately, we can't change the past. But thanks to you, we're changing the present and future of many other children. I know, she replied. It's just that sometimes I think we could have done something sooner. Caroline, who was approaching and heard the end of the conversation, intervened. Sophie, in medicine, we learn a difficult lesson. We can't save everyone, but that doesn't mean we should give up trying. Each life we save is a victory. The girl nodded, absorbing the wisdom of the words. That's why I want to be a doctor too, she finally said. Like you. Caroline smiled, genuinely touched. And you'll be an excellent doctor, I'm sure. William, who was waiting in the car, honked impatiently. Sophie, come on, the movie starts in an hour. Michael laughed at his son's impatience. I think you'd better go. The movie was his idea and he's been excited for weeks. Sophie smiled, her mood visibly improving. Thank you for everything, Godfather. It was the best birthday of my life. She hugged Michael and then Caroline, then ran to the car where William was waiting for her. Watching the two together, Michael felt a wave of gratitude. Fate had acted in mysterious ways, bringing Sophie into his life at the exact moment when his son needed her most. She's amazing, commented Caroline, following his gaze. Yes, agreed Michael. And to think I almost ignored her in that hospital corridor. Caroline smiled. Some people enter our lives by chance and end up giving us a purpose. Michael nodded, reflecting on how his life had completely changed since that fateful night. You know, he said as they walked to their own car, before William got sick, I was just another businessman obsessed with profits and expansion. I barely had time for my own son. And now? Now I understand what really matters, he replied, simply. And I discovered that I can use my resources for something much greater than building buildings or accumulating wealth. Caroline smiled, gently squeezing his hand. It's a beautiful transformation. That was only possible thanks to a brave girl who dared to speak when all the adults failed, completed Michael. As the sun set on the Boston horizon, casting golden tones over the city, both shared the silent certainty that this was just the first page of a much larger story, a story of hope, courage, and the extraordinary difference that a single voice can make, no matter how small it may seem. 5 years later, the auditorium at Harvard University was packed for the Young Scientists of the Year award ceremony. In the front row, Michael, Caroline, now his wife, William, and Mrs. Connie anxiously awaited as the name Sophie Anderson Bennett was announced. The 18-year-old young woman, now officially adopted by the family, took the stage with confidence, but still maintaining the humility that had always characterized her. Her medication reaction monitoring app for children, MedAlert Kids, had been implemented in hospitals across the United States and was beginning to be adapted for international use. This award isn't just mine, said Sophie at the microphone. It belongs to every child who contributed their experiences, to every family who trusted in our work, and especially to those who couldn't be saved, but whose memory drives us to continue. In the audience, Michael held Caroline's hand, both with tears in their eyes, as they watched the girl who had entered their lives so unexpectedly transform into a brilliant and compassionate young scientist. William, now 16 and already involved in his own social projects, enthusiastically applauded his adoptive sister. The bond between them had strengthened over the years, transforming into a powerful partnership that combined Sophie's scientific insight with William's technological ability. At the back of the auditorium, a familiar figure observed the scene with a mixture of regret and admiration. Dr. Mark, who after serving his sentence now dedicated himself to lectures on medical ethics, using his own story as an example of the dangers of corruption in the healthcare system. After the ceremony, as the family celebrated at a special dinner, Sophie shared her newest idea. I'm thinking of expanding MedAlert to remote communities using offline technology so children without internet access can also participate. That's an ambitious project, commented Michael. But necessary, replied Sophie with the conviction that had always characterized her. After all, it was the most vulnerable children who suffered first from Immunoplus. Caroline smiled, proud of the social sensitivity the young woman maintained, despite her success and recognition. The foundation can finance a pilot project, she suggested, perhaps starting with Native American reservations or remote rural areas. I've already started developing a version that works through SMS, added William, always ready to transform his sister's ideas into practical solutions. Mrs. Connie observed the conversation with silent pride, still amazed at the path life had taken. From hospital cleaner to social project coordinator, her transformation mirrored her daughter's, though less visible to the outside world. Sophie, she said, your grandmother always said that God writes straight with crooked lines. I think your illness, as painful as it was the beginning of something much greater. Sophie smiled at her mother. You know what I've learned over all these years? That sometimes the universe puts the right person in the right place at the exact right time. I was in that hospital corridor for a reason. Michael raised his glass in a toast. To Sophie, who taught us that the most important voice isn't always the loudest, but the most sincere. And to the family we built, added Caroline, united not by blood, but by shared purpose. Sophie looked at the people around her, the godfather who had become a father, the doctor who had become a mother, the patient who had become a brother, and the biological mother who had remained her safe harbor through all the changes. An unlikely family, formed by the most unexpected, circumstances. You know, she said thoughtfully, when I was little and lived wandering the corridors of that hospital, I dreamed of making a difference someday, but I never imagined it would be like this. And this is just the beginning, replied William enthusiastically. Imagine what we'll still do in the coming years. Sophie smiled at her adoptive brother, remembering the pale and weak boy she had met on that fateful night at the hospital. Who could have imagined that encounter would change so many lives? Outside the restaurant, the city of Boston pulsed in its frenetic rhythm, but within that small family circle, time seemed to slow down, allowing them to appreciate the extraordinary journey they had shared. To the future, said Sophie, raising her glass of juice. To the future, they all responded in unison. A future that, thanks to the courage of a small girl in a hospital corridor, would be safer for children across the country. The end of the story. And you, what did you think of this story of overcoming and courage? A simple girl who changed the destiny of so many people with her determination. If you've witnessed or know someone who made a difference even when nobody believed, share it in the comments. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more touching stories like this one.